Hi, I'm Jenny Miller of Let's Get Sewing. Are you ready to take the fear and frustration out of your sewing experience and finally get sewing? Then you're in the right place. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any of my tips and tutorials. And check out the caption too. There's a link to my website where you can find out more about my course, Conquer Your Sewing Machine, and future courses that I have coming. And now, let's get sewing. Hi, thanks for joining me today. Today I have a little bit different format. I'm just sitting here and I'm going to talk to you about scissors. And I thought I would just give you an overview of the scissors that I have in my sewing room, what I use them for, how often I use them, which are more important than others, and why I like them. And then maybe in future videos I can get into more detail about each one. So I have a whole array of scissors sitting out here in no particular order, but I wanted to start with probably my most important pair, and these are my gingers. This is, I believe, a 6-inch blade or an 8-inch. I guess I could measure that. Yes, that's a 6-inch blade pair of shears. These are the scissors that I use to cut out fabric, cut out patterns when I'm cutting things out. Um, I got this pair in college. They are a good quality pair of sewing shears. And I'll tell you why I love them. Not necessarily because they're Ginger. I love them because they are solid metal, so they are sturdy. Some scissors have plastic handles that just creates one more point where things could break down. So I love that these are solid metal, they're heavy, they're sturdy, and they feel good. I love the weight of them in my hands. Now, some people prefer a longer blade, like an 8-inch blade, which is perfectly fine. You can make even longer strokes with that. But I got these in college. My hand is used to them now, and I just love them. I haven't had to have them sharpened very often. They have stayed nice and sharp because they're such a good quality, high quality stainless steel pair of scissors. And I baby them. I still have the original case that they go into to keep them protected when I'm not using them. So that is the pair of scissors that I have used the most, that I have had the longest, and that I still love to use. Now, a few years ago, I saw these. They were on sale on the Madame Sew website, and I have to admit, I got them for nostalgia reasons. My mom had an old pair of electric scissors that had a cord that plugged into the wall. This is actually a rechargeable set of scissors. So I went ahead and ordered it, and I have to say, I love it. They cut out so fast. Now I'm going to run this for just a second and you're going to see they're quite loud. So the first time my husband heard me using them upstairs, he came up to see what on earth I was doing in my sewing room. They are loud. My mom's were loud too, but they go through fabric like butter. That having been said, they also kind of like to go this way. So you have to be very careful to keep them straight, to keep them right along the edge of the pattern. And so for that reason, I only use them for like long sections, like maybe a hem or the long side seam of a dress that I'm cutting out. When I get into more detailed areas like a neckline or an arm side, then I will set them down and I do put the cap back on them and I will pull out my gingers. And so let me show you an example of when I have done that. This is a shoulder yoke for a blouse that I am in the process of making. I just cut it out yesterday. And so I cut out these long sides and this hem. I can put the pattern piece down. I cut them out with this very noisy pair of scissors because I could just zip right up the side, zip around the bottom, which is slightly curved, but it made a nice smooth curve, being careful that I didn't get too wiggly this direction. So I did that super slick, super fast. When I got up here to the top, and this is the part that will be against my neck, It also has this dart in it, which gets cut out. It's a little bit of a different kind of dart. I did not want to mess with something that could move around a lot because on a small area like this, that could be a huge difference, make a huge difference. So I stopped after I did the sides and the bottom, I stopped, and all along the top, the dart and this side here, then I cut out with my gingers so that I got a much more accurate cut. You can see that there are little allowances here for the seam allowance and things like that that I wanted to make sure were accurate so that I get that dart nice and accurate. So I keep hitting the button on these. These are fun. They are nostalgic for me. If you can afford a pair, and they weren't that expensive, I want to say they were on sale like $39 or $49, something like that. I would say get a pair. You'll love it. You'll use them. But something that's not necessary, I would definitely recommend these for anyone who is beginning. So let me tell you about some of the other scissors that are in my collection. This is probably my other most often used pair of scissors, and they are just little clippers. Now, there are lots of different versions of these. There are very nice stainless steel ones. There are all sorts of different ones, but I have to tell you, I think these were $2.75 a pair because I bought 5. They were $3, but if you bought 5, they were $2.75 a pair, if I'm remembering correctly. So I bought all 5. I keep one right in front of my sewing machine. So as I'm sewing, it is right here, and then I just pick it up and clip the threads. To me, to pick up a pair of scissors, well, let's show you with this. If I had these sitting here to pick them up, sometimes might need 2 hands so I don't push it off into my lap. And it's just clunky and awkward for clipping the tiniest little threads. And so that's why I love these. I'm done with my seam, I pull it out and snip like that. Then if I have any little tails, they just snip off super easy. So I buy these in bulk, if you consider 5 to be bulk. I have a pair by my sewing machine. I keep a pair here on my cutting table. I have a pair in my rolling bag for when I take my sewing machine to a class or when I'm teaching a class, something like that. And then I have a couple just in reserve for when these start to get dull because they are cheap. They won't last forever, but at that price, I can afford to replace them, no problem. So my gingers and my nippers, for sure, the two that I cannot live without. My electric scissors, lots of fun, very nostalgic, definitely handy. If you want to spend the money on it, I think it would be worth having a pair, but not something that you absolutely need. When I bought my gingers in college, they came in a set. And the other pair of scissors in the set was this little pair. And these are the same high quality stainless steel that the big shears were made out of. These are called Tailor point scissors. And they're called that because they can clip in a lot of the little tiny intricate corners, like on a collar of a suit coat or anything that's being tailored. They can do a lot of detailed work in those little corners. And so I use these when I am clipping a corner that I have sewn and I need to trim it down. They just make a nice little snip. I got these in college, so 1991, 92, somewhere in there, and I have never had them sharpened. Believe it or not, I have had my shears sharpened, but these, because they do, just little snips and things in corners, I have never had to have them sharpened. For the most part, I use the point getting in little corners. So back here does not get nearly as much use unless I'm trimming something like I just showed you. But I absolutely love these. They came with my shears, and so now I couldn't live without them for trimming little things like that. I'm trying to decide which ones to show you next. I'm going to put these two, I'm going to show them to you together because for the most part, I use them for kind of the same thing. This is a pair of scissors that I actually bought for my daughter when she took some sewing classes at the age of 6 or 7. I knew that if I tried to teach her how to sew at that age, she wasn't going to listen. It was not going to end well. But I had a friend from church who was offering classes for children, and so I let her take those to get her feet wet, and then she'd listen to me when I tried to help her with sewing. So it worked out really well. But my friend recommended these for children because of the spring in the handle. It's much easier for children to control than a big heavy set of shears. And so I got these for her. Well, she didn't want them anymore. She has her own shears and other things now, and they're still here at the house. And I love them for grading seams. Now we'll talk about grading seams another time, but I'm just going to show you here really quickly because they easily slide between the layers of fabric, and I can trim off just one seam allowance like that. And so I just keep them by my machine. My shears and everything stay on the cutting table, but these and my little nippers are by my machine where I can grab them and just quickly grade seams. Now, the reason I pulled out these with it, this is a pair of embroidery scissors, a special, or applique scissors more specifically when you sew applique things on. I got them with, not with, but to go with my embroidery machine because some of the programs, some of the designs that you do on an embroidery machine involve cutting away fabric and then embroidering over the edge. And these can get right up close to that seam and cut that fabric off because they sit flat like this. Well, after I got them, I started seeing a lot of reels and TikTok things online where people used these to grade their seams because, again, this nice duckbill here, and these are called duckbill scissors, slide right in here and you can grade your seams, and they keep the seam allowances apart very nicely. And so I've been using them for that lately as well, especially when it's a very short, small seam that I need to grade, or it's in a small place or a small corner. So I would say that 90% of the time, this is what I use to grade seams, but every once in a while, in a unique situation, I will pull out my applique scissors to grade the seams. But I have used these quite a bit with several different programs on my embroidery machine to cut away fabric. And I can talk more about that in other videos as well. Now, just a couple other pairs of scissors that I wanted to talk to you about. You know the old adage, no one gets to use mom's sewing scissors. Paper will dull sewing scissors faster than anything. It's still very ironic to me that that's the case because to me, paper seems much more delicate. But there's something about the way paper is made, the way it meshes together or something that will dull your sewing scissors. So I keep a pair around for cutting paper because I work so often with PDF patterns which are just made from your regular printer paper. You do not want to cut them with your good sewing scissors. So I have a pair of paper scissors, or a pair of scissors specifically for paper. And I actually have a couple different ones. This is just an old pair. I think I may have inherited this one from my mother-in-law. Not extremely sharp, but works fine on paper. And then these, literally like little kindergarten, the scissors my kids had when they were in school, their name's still written on it so that we could tell there's a part from everyone else. But I keep them around just for clipping paper and that sort of thing. So have an extra pair of scissors in your sewing room for paper. Make sure your family knows that's the pair they need to grab when they're wrapping presents or something in your sewing room. I also have this pair. Interesting story. Some friends of ours he was a sales rep for the WISS, W-I-S-S scissor company for a while. He had boxes full of scissors and scissor samples that he gave away free to, clients that he was trying to sell them to. And we happened to be out in Georgia and visiting. And of course, since I sew, he thought I might want a whole bunch of scissors. I think he probably gave me 3 or 4 pairs, and I don't even know what's happened to the others, but these I have kept track of. I did think these would be great shears for cutting fabric because they're long. This is an 8-inch blade, which you can, if you want to see the difference between a 6-inch and an 8-inch blade, it was a nice long blade. These are solid metal, just like these. They're not stainless steel. They're They probably are steel, but they're just a different grade of steel. And then the handle is just dipped in rubber to make it a little more comfortable and a little bit easier to grip. These have never cut fabric well. They weren't made for fabric necessarily, and so they never did work well. So this is the pair that I pull out when I need to cut wire, wired ribbon maybe, elastic, plastic, anything really thick and hard to cut that I don't want to risk using my good shears on. This is my industrial, grab it, kind of keep in the scrap drawer pair of scissors. And so I have those in my sewing room as well. There's one last pair that I want to tell you about. And this is a funny looking pair of scissors, and they have this little screw here to control them. So I'll explain that to you in just a second. These are buttonhole scissors. They're going to cut a buttonhole for you. I inherited these from my mom as well. So you can see right in here how much of that blade is overlapping. And if I back off this screw, now more of it overlaps for a longer buttonhole or less for a shorter buttonhole. And so when I've sewn a buttonhole, this is my buttonhole scrap. I never sew a buttonhole on my garment until I've tested it on my scrap first to make sure it's the right length, to make sure everything's working, that kind of thing. So I have a lot of buttonholes here. A few of them are cut open, some of them are not. So I'll just lay it down here by this buttonhole and kind of back it off until the part that overlaps here matches the length of my buttonhole. Then this open space is not going to cut the fabric. So I would pull it in like this and just cut right along there, and it cuts open the buttonhole without cutting either end of the buttonhole reinforcement. So those are kind of fun. For years, I didn't have these. I would just take my Tailor points actually and fold the buttonhole in half, carefully snip in there. And these Tailor points are so fine that they go right between the stitching, get a little hole started, and then I would also open my buttonholes with my Tailor points like that. So that's another reason you might like a little pair of Tailor point scissors, but these buttonhole scissors work just the same. In fact, I have a pair in my Amazon shop. So if you're interested in something like that, I'll put an affiliate link in the caption so that you can get a pair and try a pair of buttonhole scissors, because they're a lot of fun. Again, not necessary, but I inherited them from my mom, and now I love them even better than messing with my Tailor points, although they did a perfect job for years. So that is all of the scissors that I have in, oh, no, it's not. I almost forgot this last pair of scissors to tell you about. These are my pinking shears, and they have this zigzagged edge. And you may have seen something like this for scrapbooking, things like that, but these are specifically for fabric. And I got these in college as well, but they are not gingers. For those who didn't have sergers in college, we would actually pink the edges of our fabric to prevent fraying. And so the way pinking shears work, if you've never seen it before, let's see, I can cut off this side of my scrap. They cut just like a regular pair of scissors, and they give you this nice pinked or zigzagged edge. Now, each of those angles is 45 degrees, which constitutes the bias of the fabric. And so because each of those is on a bias, the fabric will not fray past where you've pinked the edges of the fabric. And so before sergers, you saw pinking shears a lot more because people would use it for that kind of thing. You can also zigzag along the edge of your fabric, but that's one thing that pinking shears can be used for. Also, if you're pre-washing your fabric, pinking shears is a great way to finish the end before you throw it in the wash so you don't get all of the raveling and tangling going on in the wash. So pinking shears are great for that purpose as well. So that is all of the scissors that I have in my sewing room in my collection. That is what I use them for. There are no hard and fast rules about what kind of scissors you need to have, but I thought that I would share with you my thoughts on them so that maybe it could help you and make things a little bit easier for you. So thank you for joining me. And as always, any questions you may have, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'd love to chat with you. Thank you for joining me today. My goal is to take the frustration out of your sewing experience, and so I hope my tips are helpful. Feel free to comment with any questions or ideas you may have. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. Now, let's get sewing.